was on a tour, so please be kind. I have to go through 2 years of the pandemic to just tell my partner this every day, so we're going to be a little bit shaky, but bear with me. So I'm going to be talking to you about how to create a community around your brand. It's not too fluffy at all. There are some pragmatic points in between. So when we think about running a business, you obviously, there's a commercial objective, you want to sell something, but you want to find the right people to sell it to, and you want them to be engaged with you, and you want to create a legacy. You don't want a flash in the pan business, you want something where people are engaged with your brand, they tell people and then refer it on. I've got a little example for you. So Harley Davidson, surely everyone's heard of Harley Davidson, right? Their business was not doing so well back in the 80s, but yet today we still know who they are, and that's because at that point in their business they decided to place a bit of emphasis around community and create a group of people that were aligned with their values and interests. So they're the best example that we can think of in terms of, everyone knows Harley Davidson, even if you're not into motorcycles. A little bit of context on what I do at ConsumeComms. So it's a little boutique business. I've run events for about 17 odd years. This was back before the pandemic hit, and we used to have a room full of people all interested. So our focus in terms of delivering marketing is not salesy. We look at creating authentic communication. And what does that mean? It means creating content that people are interested with and they engage with. So you're going to hear me say the word community a lot. And communication, we talk about everything through to social media, to your interactions that you speak to people, through to running events, everything around that. I talked a lot about authentic engagement and grassroots activity. So grassroots activity is that moment that you meet someone and you engage with them and you start talking to them. These are the kind of things we do. We're a typical marketing agency. We do digital, we do brand management. How do we do things a little bit differently? Well, simply put, we do authentic marketing in terms of we take time to understand what people do, what that business is. It's about having conversations, understanding the interests of the people that you're trying to engage with. So it's not sector specific. It's really more about taking time when you meet someone. So when you're here today, when you engage with any of these businesses here, all of these businesses here are an opportunity. They might not be someone you're going to directly sell to, but they're going to appreciate you. You're going to give them 5 minutes, and then they're going to go off and refer your business to somebody else, or may buy from you. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about making sure that you just take an interest in people, especially this side of the pandemic where we didn't have that one-to-one contact with people as much. I think it's a Zoom culture. Now you can get out, you can meet people, you can have those water cooler moments, I call them, where you just have chat that doesn't really mean anything, but you engage with someone on a level, and you take that away, and they'll like you, and they'll tell other people about, I met that person at that event, and I remember this from their business. So I have a little case study. Back when we were able to do big events, I founded Glug Yorkshire. So those who don't know anything about Glug was a community, a networking community that was global. So they had 35 chapters around the world, and they specialised in creative meetups. It was called Glug, which is not probably so PC these days because it was a drinking. It was an after-work networking gig where people would meet, and you'd normally have a couple of speakers, and you'd network. It's about informal networking. Their slogan was not working. I ran that in Yorkshire for 6 years, every month, 150 people, and it was the longest running chapter globally. Since then it has gone under because Glug as a culture, drinking in the evenings, it's kind of changed now, people don't really want to do that so much. But the premise of why that went on is everyone's in a LinkedIn group that's got no activity. I'm sure you're all in at least one LinkedIn group that doesn't have anything going on. The benefit of Glug as a community is it had consistency. It was something that happened every month. It was something that had a theme, it had some value. But then on the other side of that, it always had the informalness of it. You could go there and you could chat to people. So you would have consistency in that event's going to run every month. You miss it 1 month, you can go the month after. as the brand, you're the point of contact. So you're the centralised communication point. So Glug was a point that people knew. If they moved to a city, so often I get people that are moving from London or from New Zealand, and they drop us a message saying, I'm moving to the city and I need to network with someone. I don't really know where to go, and we get them to come along and we handle. So we became a centralised point for that community. There's also a difference between having like physical meetups and also making sure that you have an online presence as well. So even though we weren't able to conduct those after work boozy events over the last 2 years, that community still continued because we still made sure we had consistency. We still had a roadmap, a pipeline of things that happened every month with a theme. So my example of Glug is to show you how I know about running these things. I'm going to give you some pointers next on other bits that you can do for communities. So community is not just about having the boozy meetup life, because that's pretty much over now. Other things we do, I have a podcast that I unfortunately named Sounds from the Underground. It is not a Girls Aloud tribute. It was more the thinking of offering people a very genuine, authentic view of running a business. So if you ever listen to it, it is a little bit sweary, and it's uncut. It's just three people that run a business talking very honestly about running a business. And that's one of the things I would say is really important about creating your business community, is talking to people in a way that is honest. They feel that they're getting value from you. Not necessarily salesy, but it's having that connection again. So I had to put my money where my mouth was to start this podcast that talks about the highs and lows of running a business, about people, about relationships, about fighting with your partner, about talking about work. So yeah, if you ever listen to it, it's not the Girls Aloud tribute, you're going to be disappointed. The other thing we do as a business, we run a lot of events. So we run them professionally in terms of outreach. So we can flip it and do professional events where I just put on because I really like a picture of us at Leeds City Town Hall. It's very professional. But the point is, it's curating those professional events. So with God's sake, it was very informal, it was busy, people didn't have a good time, but it had an objective. So you also need to make sure that when you're creating communities, there's very strong purpose to what you're doing. So you mix it up between having these professional events, but also make sure you have a level of informality where people can get together and chat and have those little conversations, those water cooler moments. There are some show reels on our YouTube that are more professional than, but if you want to have a laugh, probably go for the podcast because there's a lot of swearing and fun. So those are a couple of examples. This that you want, this is the how do you create a community that lasts for 6 years and expands globally. So you have to create a brand culture people can engage with. Sometimes you hear people talk about tribes a lot, which I find a little bit annoying because it's a bit of a buzzword now. But what does it actually mean? So it means finding the people that care about the same thing as you. So it doesn't always seem like it's obvious when you're running a business that you need to think about this kind of fluffy side of like what do people care about, but you do actually need to think if you want to create a business that has legacy and that is going to create a good referral network and have plenty of people that are interested in your business and your product and your service, you need to have something that a value system that they can engage with. I always put a little thing about don't use overly salesy jargon. I'm just telling my colleague how the best way to do business is don't talk about your business. Talk about what that person's doing, because otherwise how can you make sure that you're tailoring your product or service if you're not listening to them? Which slides nicely into less noise, which is very unusual because I chat a lot. More listening. Listening is a big part of building a community, listening to what people want from that community, being part of those conversations. I am actually not a natural networker. I really do hate going to networking events and like having to sign up to people and say, so what is it you do? So I generally don't look for those sort of things when I go out, but those micro interactions where you go and get a cup of coffee and you're standing there and you're like, where's the sugar? Those things are part of those micro interactions that then build into bigger conversations. So that's what I kind of talk about when I say about, is your brand approachable? Are you approachable as a person, or do you look like you're very kind of, like, can someone look at you and see that you're going to be the kind of person they want to do business with? Do you seem approachable? Dedicating those times to those little micro interactions is very important. Having those times where you don't just pass someone by, it's the little things, it's the human element. It's if you just go to a networking event and you sit on their own, it's like, oh, I really don't want to make conversation, but you do. You don't know where that's going to go. That little bit of kindness, that little bit of chat can lead to bigger things. Then there's actually going back to basics and thinking about your business. So when you start business, you know, right, okay, this is what I want to do as a business, this is my product, this is my service. What's the actual culture of the business? And that's not as big a question as you think. Brand persona is really about what values you have, and that can be as simple as I want to do a good job, I want to impress people, I want to deliver something that people will go and tell the rest of their network about. But to create a good community, you really need to have 3 or 4 solid values that you stick to rigidly. So when I ran Glove throughout that whole 6 years, I was adamant I wanted it to be independent. We never took sponsorship because I never wanted someone to come and be overtly salesy to the audience. I always wanted it to be purely independent, so anyone that came would be able to feel comfortable, they're not getting sold to, and just network and enjoy that event. So as a business, you kind of need to think, what is it about your business that you want to do? What is it that you want people to know you for and like you for? You have to turn your business into a person, which is the whole business persona bit. What do you want your community to think about you? So it depends if you're talking about your business community or the region, the area. So we are based, I was based in York for a long time, and being a Southerner there, I really wanted them to not have that north-south divide. So I spent a lot of time making sure that I was active in the community, doing different things. So you have to kind of think about what are those values. So that's the first bit of starting community, is identifying those values. 3 or 4, don't need to be massively altruistic or anything, but you just have some solid values that are going to run through your business that you apply to everything that you do, that you go back on. It's the kind of the secret sauce of what makes your business what it is. Sometimes if you're on your own, those brand values are basically your values. That's always a good place to start with. What are the people like in your business? It's also important for recruitment. So what are the kind of things that you want? What are the things you want in a person that's going to work for you? What are the kind of things you're going to want in a client that's going to be working with you? And there are 3 ways of doing this. So I've set up a few communities over the years. And it all begins with research. So once you know what your brand values are, they may change over time. You pick 3 things that you want to be known for, that you want the people that work for you to be like, and the people that you work with to be like. Then you have to start research. You understand the area, understand your business, understand what are other businesses like in your area or in your sector. Consistency. So going back, consistency through your brand values. So making sure that you always go back to, so if you're a sustainable business, you have to kind of make sure that you stick with that if you go off track at some point. So if you have a business that's all about sustainability, you have to consider that through everything from packaging to whatever else it would be, but be consistent in how you deliver things, be consistent in how you communicate your brand, but also be consistent in how you do things. So from an event perspective, at the end of every event, I always say what the next event's going to be, so people know what's coming up next. Being vocal about what you're doing also falls into consistency, and then visibility. So once you've decided what your values are, what you're going to be doing to tell people about those values, having visibility, making sure that you're out there, which doesn't necessarily mean you have to be out and about and running around at events every single day of the week, which I've done, and it's not fun. You can now use the medium of the people in your network, you can use digital, all sorts. The best thing I've found moving around the country in terms of research is finding pockets of people. I've also found that to be the most useful thing in terms of my business. So finding people that are useful in your network. So you may have people that are useful in helping your business grow. You may find pockets of people that are useful in giving you information about that area. You might find people like that are useful for helping you understand what's the next big thing that's coming. So that kind of falls into research and forums, finding those pockets of people, which is again the Inland Tribe thing, finding those people that are going to be useful to help you further your business and all form part of your wider community. Creating a base of content, which goes back to what I do as a living, is writing, social media, finding that base of stuff that we explain to people what it is you do and consistently putting that out. Having a tone, that kind of also is to do with not being overly salesy. So your tone should really reflect your brand values, your business, and falls into the research. So understanding what it is, how do other people talk that will operate in your area, in the area that you want to be in, and then targeting the right person. So having visibility is great, but what's the point if you're not targeting the right people? So going fall back to your three of doing the research, where are the people that you need to target, consistently being available in their spaces, whether it be on social media, whether it be at events. So this is the kind of commercial bit. So building those target audiences is around finding those groups of people that are useful. So you've found like a community of people that you want to plug into. You then have to find the people in that are useful to then access that and use them to leverage that network. We use Twitter lists. So I don't know, does anyone ever still use Twitter? Any active Twitter people? Does anyone use Twitter for not complaining? So I use Twitter purely for creating lists. Does anyone use the list function? It's a thing I've been doing for a long, long time, and I don't know if anyone even realises that button's still there. So how we build our pockets of people and forums is we create Twitter lists. So we find one person that is the ideal target person, be it a client or a person we want to work for, or a business that we want to work with. We follow them on Twitter, and then you get a load of suggestions. You add them to a list. That list then forms a nice feed of their top conversations and their top topics. So it's a really good way of very quickly finding out what your target audience is talking about, and also where they are, how to get in touch with them, other people that are of use. So if that's one thing you take away today, go back on Twitter, don't complain on there, don't go and say, when you give bad feedback, everyone always uses Twitter for complaining about Tesco delivery didn't turn up. Go onto Twitter lists and have a little look and how to see. There's also Twitter lists that already exist, so depending on what you're trying to access or what community you want to be part of, it's always better to start by accessing the community than trying to set one up your own. Have a look and see. You can add other people's and use that. It's a really good research tool for business and for setting tone as well, for seeing how people speak. I have no idea what this particular talk on, but I always find this guy funny. I think it's a funny gift. So communities don't grow without activity. That's not to say that you have to put on loads of events all the time, but it means you have to maintain conversation. You have to keep some ongoing flow. You want something that people can contribute to as well. You don't want to be shouting into the void and just having an echo chamber. So you need to that's why you create these, you do this research and you understand what are people talking about, what are the hot topics, what are people interested, create some dialogue. You want things that people can contribute to, and that's where the value is. So it does involve actually a bit of legwork to understand what's going on and what are people interested in. The brand being the centralised point of communication, but also has some practical elements. So you may decide to set up Facebook group. It's still there. People still do Facebook groups. LinkedIn group, but please, as I said at the beginning, don't set up a LinkedIn group and then have no activity in it. If you're going to do it, you've got to commit to it. Pick one thing if it's too much. Pick a platform and have that as your platform where people go. So if you do host an event, where do people go to continue the conversation afterwards? Make it accessible. Not everybody wants to go to an event. Everyone feels comfortable meeting people and talking. So as part of your community, there needs to be a centralised point. Even if you have your website, the website then needs to have these offshoots of where do people go to continue a conversation with you. Hopefully it's not going to be on Twitter complaining. you want some positivity in there, so key questions and topics like that, but you have to take the responsibility of being that centralised point of where that community is going to have a conversation. So you can't maintain have a community without conversation. The conversation bit is the hardest bit. That is where the legwork's involved. Keeping abreast of what people want to talk about, what's happening in your industry is the effort. But I think we're very fortunate. We have the internet now. We can see various different ways for chatting to people. There's a lot of ways that you can have these conversations, and you don't have to do the legwork. This is why you create a community, and you get people involved, and you get people engaged, and you find out, you let them lead the conversations, you let them talk about what is happening and what's of interest. You just facilitate it, and that's the best way to keep your community going. And as this is all tied in with your business as the centralised communication point, as the centralised community point, this is the commercial benefit, is that it all comes back to your business, showing that you're leading, you're creating a network of people that is useful, and that's how it all comes back. So you're not overtly selling a thing, but you're creating visibility for your business in a positive way that makes it of interest for other people to come back to. Yeah, I literally say this to every single client I meet here. You can't be broadcasting. Has anyone seen the donut analogy, where it gives you examples of like different platforms, and it just basically people selling like buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. This is the polar opposite. This is come to a nice donut shop opening, enjoy the donuts that we've put on, have a conversation, and remember that it was us that showed you that kindness. Broadcasting overly salesy content really doesn't work now. People like that human element. They like to remember people, but it does take a little bit of work. In terms of visibility, so there's a lot of different ways you can do this. So, I'm a marketer. I will use different social media channels and change and put out newsletters, whether from someone in spam or I don't like. Podcasts is aware at the beginning. There's different ways of maintaining that community. You've got your physical events, you've got podcasts, you've got vlogs, you've got attending events. There's all sorts of things you can do now in terms of creating that visibility, but you need to maintain it. Best way to do that is old-fashioned writing a marketing calendar. From January to December, draft out what are you going to do, where can you go to find these people, what events are you putting on, what activity are you putting on, what activity are you going to attend, and then overlaying that with your business objectives of how you're going to change those things you're doing along the way. Yes, social media is a good point to do it, but it doesn't all have to be on social media. And if you are going to do social media, make sure it's social. I think the gentleman that's on before me talked about humour. Humour is a good way to do it because we don't all want to be scrolling, like it's so noisy on social media now. We don't want to just keep scrolling through and seeing loads of salesy content. A little bit of humour, a bit of personality, a little bit of human of like what's happening is more interesting, which is why my podcast is very uncensored and sweary, because it's more interesting than just listening to how great it is to run business. You do have to dedicate time to running these communities, so somebody told me it's like 20 minutes a day. I mean, it's rubbish. You can't put a time set on it. You just have to dedicate time. That it is one of those things where you have to just dedicate some time to keeping it going, to talking to people, to taking time out. Get out and meet more people. If you've done it already, you'll be meeting more people. That's good. Building that network of supporters is really important. So even though you've got your community and they're all really involved and they love what you're doing, you have to continue to build that network of supporters. So that kind of is in the vein of, no, there is no competition. Everybody has their own nuances. So it's always so good to go out and experience other people's events, other people's businesses, collaborate. Collaborating is a really good way of building a community, and also it's good for your business because not everybody, even if you find another marketing business, like if I was doing collaborating with another marketing business, the way I do things is going to be slightly different to how they do things. So I don't know how fast I talk because I do go talk a bit fast and he's disappeared. But the breakdown is it's very much about people. authentic is about people. It's finding a way to speak to people in a way that's interesting to them, and have a bit of faith in your business, your product, your service, that it is of interest, that you can deliver it in a way that's not overly salesy. Have a conversational tone. I am very informal. I don't have a business tone. Most of the time I'm just trying to tone down my Mockney tone, so that you can have, people engage with real people. Even if you have no idea what I talked about, you will have remembered me up here saying community 1,500 times, because people remember people, they like it when you feel like you're having a conversation. Interaction, in whatever way that is. I know sometimes it's a little bit difficult, everyone's a people person, but there's different ways of maintaining that interaction. Especially now we have the internet. Every possible way to engage with people. For audio, you could have video, you can just send messages, but again, don't be angry on Twitter. Make sure that you're consistent, and all of this great community activity that you're doing for your business has to be backed up with the commercial. So you then have to create those meetings afterwards. Always at the back of your mind, even though you're doing it for the community, you have to remember what your values are. What are you doing for your business? And give it some personality. Your brand really should have a personality. Yeah, that's the glue that sticks everything together. The other guys have been finished, so I'm assuming that my time's running out soon as well. Someone could have any questions, anything. Do you feel like you've got a grasp of the community for commercial? We're like, no, we're just going to go to events, and we're going to go back to boozy events and pizza. These are a couple of the places to work, so this is a little bit of credibility, shall we say. So in terms of me going out and doing stuff, these are a couple of the communities that I work with that aren't specifically related to my business. I don't sell marketing to these people, but I work with them for visibility of my business and because their values sit with mine. So only a little plug for them. If anybody's interested, BC stands for the British East and Southeast Asian Network. If anybody in tech, Empowering Women with Tech do a lot of events around the country. We do mad things like we tried to book Michelle Obama to come and tell us about how she uses Twitter, things like that. And like miles over it. So you have to kind of put your money where your mouth is and get around. But in this day and age, I try and balance it out. I don't go networking 5 days a week anymore. I just try and limit it. I've done it in a more strategic way, which is why I'm telling you guys to plan out a marketing calendar of 12 months and what you want to do and how that sits with your objectives. For me, I'm looking to engage more with the ESA market, to talk about my own heritage and roots, and that's why our collaborators now work in that way. So you have to be smart with it. And I also have with me my colleagues, so my shameless plug at the end is we do have a product here. If anyone has a old school business card, throw it away. Which is just, we've got our business cards, our smart business cards that come over and have a little tap, so they've got an NFC chip in them. So when you tap them on your phone, it will pop up with a mini website that is very self-indulgent. It's pictures of me, it's our YouTube, it's our podcasts, it's everything on there. But on the back end of that, it's got a dashboard so you can see who you engage with. So it does have a bit of synergy with what I do in the community, because it's my way of collecting information about the people that I've spoken to that I can follow up with. But Powell does a much better demonstration than me because he's very technical, I'm very chatty. So between the two of us, we should be able to show you about the smart business cards. That is me. If anybody wants to talk to me about how they can apply community to their brand communication, I'll be just in this corner. Hope it was useful. I hope I've not spoken really fast because that is what I tend to do. But thank you all for being kind of my first talk out.